You know what bothers me? I think there are so many people afraid to want what they want. Afraid to go after what they want in life. Afraid to go after what they desire in life. People like you. Afraid. And they are afraid because they do not want to bear the discomfort associated with change. But I don't think they realize how much that fear could be costing them. Truth be told, there's so much more at stake living a life that has you boxed in. Alright, humor me for a minute, right? I want you, whether by grabbing a piece of paper and writing it down, or if you're bad like that, you could just keep it all in your head. You could do this exercise all in your head. I want you to think about every single dream job you've ever had, as in from kindergarten, as far back as you could remember. And I want you to write it down, and I want you to try and put a age beside. If you need some time to go handle that, then you can pause the video and then come back. If you can't bother with all of that, then I will use myself as an example to get my point across. When I was maybe 3 years old, I think the first thing I wanted to be was a fireman. That didn't last too long because by the time I maybe was about 5, I wanted to be a race car driver. After that, by the time I was about 10, I think at the time what I went around telling people was industrial designer, which is a lot more boring than it sounds, but I wanted to like build submarines and cars and all of that. By the time I was about 14, I think I wanted to be something in media, so like filmmaker, photographer, videographer. For quite some time, I wanted to be a YouTuber as well, but like a tech YouTuber. Mostly that was because they could make videos and get free stuff, and that seemed like a good idea to me. At some point, I wanted to go to film school. Or I thought I wanted to go to film school. By the time I had graduated, I actually wanted to be in the IT field. And that was based off of, one, my high school IT class being the easiest thing I've ever had to do in my life. And two, an internship that I took at a hotel in the IT department the summer right after I graduated. And eventually that led to me actually being in the IT field once I graduated university, which more or less leads me to where I am now, where I'm trying to do everything on that list at the same time. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you. I want you to look at those things that you have on that piece of paper. So is anything on that list what you're doing for work now? Yes or no? If you are, then great. You can skip the rest of this video because you know everything else that I'm going to mention. But if not, then I need you to ask yourself why. Because that is going to be a pivotal part in whether or not the premise of this video makes any sense. So when you ask yourself why, I want you to answer yourself, not in the crazy people kind of way, but I need you to be cognizant of the answers that come up in your head as to why you aren't what you want to be. If it's a case where you just don't want to be that anymore, then cool, although that might be a problem too, and we're getting to that. However, what I find is that most people, when an answer comes up in their head, the almost knee-jerk reaction is to say, that's not realistic. And that there is something I have a problem with. And the thing about it is that at some point in time, all of these dreams were valid. For example, one of the easiest questions to ask a child when they're around, like just in the vicinity, one of the easiest questions to ask is, what do you want to be when you grow up? There's always an interesting answer. You never get anything lame. Not to say that there are lame jobs, but there are lame jobs. But you don't ever get anything lame from a child. You don't never get a boring answer. And no matter how wild of an answer we get, we always try to encourage them and tell them they can do it and tell them the sky is the limit and all of that. But at some point, there is a cutoff line. So when there are grown people walking around having it's not realistic in their head, then that says to me that at some point, we stop telling people to shoot for the stars and started telling them to be realistic. Where's that line and why is it there? The older you get, the less people there are telling you you can do it, you can shoot for the stars, you can do anything you put your mind to. And let's be honest, if they are, it's either at some cliche graduation speech or it's some corporate gig where the star they're telling you to shoot for is employee of the month, so you can park 100 feet closer to the clock machine. But I digress. Your place of employment here is not the enemy. I want to make that clear. All things considered, the people telling you to be realistic aren't your enemy either. So then what's the enemy? The enemy itself is fear, not realism. Therefore, over the next few minutes, I am going to take you on a journey, actually. I'm just gonna clue you in on two things, two absolutely garbage takes that might be stopping you from living your best life. The first trash take is one that we mentioned already, that your dreams are not realistic. Me personally, I've been fighting realistic all my life, so I have a lot of, let's call it research, into why my belief is that the whole be realistic argument isn't real. However, I will say that it does have its place, but let's handle this first, right? Let me tell you why be realistic is a garbage take to use to run your life. If someone tells you that making $10,000 a month is unrealistic, what does that even mean? Does it mean that someone making $10,000 a month doesn't exist? There are so many people out in the world that will make 10 grand a month look like chump change. And you probably work for one of them. Why is it unrealistic? It's not unrealistic. And then, when I bring that point up to people, they usually go, oh, well, no, it's not that it's not unrealistic. It's unrealistic for me. That's your problem right there. Or even worse, you're gonna go ahead and hit them with the, oh, it's unrealistic for people like us. What does that mean? What do you mean by people like us? So there are two problems here, right? One of them is that you believe that the people who have the things that you want are somehow fundamentally different from you in some critically defining way, which is incorrect. If you have met any of these people, you know that ultimately they are just as bad as you are. Or at the very least, they have the capacity to. And as a result, you have the exact same capacity to be just as worthy, or let me not use worthy, deserving of the things that you want that they have. You understand? Not like that. Don't commit crimes. Don't steal. You do not have to thief to get the things you want. And that's another common misconception people make about being successful. Like you don't have to cheat nobody to do it. There's enough space in the world for all of that. But I think that's another video as well. And on the other side of it, like you have people whose lives are just as hard as yours, or even worse than yours, and they got it up out the mud and they did what they had to do to get where they wanted to go, to live the life they wanted to live. That was the first problem I was mentioning. The second problem with that is that you likely believe that because of the people you hang around. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the biggest issue with fear. Its ability to spread. And not just spread, but also spread false information, because none of that is true. So let me give you an example. If I am going to the gym, if my goal is to go to the gym and to get my fitness in order, right? What does it benefit me to look at another man who's already jacked? Pause. What does it benefit me to look at someone who is already where I want to be? And I must look at that person and say, oh, that's unrealistic. What do you mean that's unrealistic? He right there. That's a real person. Unrealistic is a very resignatory argument. Is that how you pronounce the word? Resignatory? It's a real dumb argument. You know, and that's why I think the whole unrealistic body standard thing doesn't make sense. That argument irked me for a long time, because it's like, yo, it can't be unrealistic if that's a real person. I'm talking about like Instagram editing, Photoshop aside, all of that. There is someone who is buying these clothes that you are saying you cannot fit into. You understand? If they weren't, they wouldn't make them. That's how you know the internet's got us twisted in the head sometimes. If you're calling it unrealistic, then it's likely that you're focusing more on the goal of aesthetics than actually being physically fit, which is the whole purpose of the thing. So, like, you eventually realize that in shape can look a number of different ways depending on the body type you have. Like, Google it. Like, you have 3 main body types, I think. You have ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph. I might be butchering the pronunciations, but like, Google it. And after looking around for a while, you'll notice that obese is not one of them. Every body type can exist outside of, you know, the BMI range for your height and whatever all of that is. I'm no fitness expert. This is no fitness channel. But yeah, the whole point of this, what does it benefit me to look at the goal I'm aspiring to achieve and call it unrealistic? It doesn't do anything. It turns out, as a result then, that be realistic is a very dangerous mindset to have, because until you solidify the vision of success in your mind, until you believe that you can achieve the thing you're trying to achieve, action is going to be very difficult to take. I think be realistic is more reserved for like low stakes situations. So like, oh, I need some flour at the supermarket or some garbage like that. And it's 5 minutes to closing time. Will I make it to the supermarket without committing traffic violations? Who knows? If you believe, you might get there. It's like, nah, that's where be realistic belongs. But be realistic is not something you want to use to make a decision that can literally change the course of your life. When you are dealing with literally the rest of your life, you need to adopt a different attitude because you legit only have the one. Another dumb version of that same trash take is you can just be in denial about what you want. Like I hear so many people talking about, oh, I don't want to be rich because, you know, the whole more money, more problems thing. And that is why I addressed that argument in the last video first. Like whichever way you look at it, you're gonna have problems. They are just better problems to have. And everything you want is attainable without selling out as well. So it's like, why not? You just have to be aware of the cost that you have to pay to get these kind of things. And you have to be stubborn enough to not sell out while you're trying to do it. All right, the second garbage take that I'll be introducing you to today is a concept that I decided to call old dreams. Yeah, so this old dream thing is something I ran into rather recently myself. And of course, with everything on this channel, this is just me sharing what I've learned in the hopes that someone else won't have to waste time on all of this in, you know, trying to better themselves. Yeah, so for the past 2 years or so, minus the past 6 months, I more or less had become everything I wanted to be when I was 16. When I started university with the intention of pursuing a career in the IT field. I had moved out by this age, I had my car by this age, you know, I was making X amount of money, I had this kind of job. To cut the long story short, fast forward 3 years later, everything is going according to plan. But I am not exactly what you would call happy. It turned out that I had everything I wanted at the time, but it didn't feel like how I thought it would feel. However, I wasn't all the way there yet. I still had a few things to accomplish, like maybe one more big milestone to hit. And based on the kind of things I had to be putting myself through to get to that one last thing, it just didn't seem like the juice was worth the squeeze anymore. So for whatever number of reasons, I eventually realized that this was a path I wasn't exactly interested in pursuing anymore. And you might say that any reasonable person would have taken a step back and reevaluated where they wanted to go and changed course, which is eventually what I did. But that process kind of took me a while, and I'm gonna tell you why. It took me way too long to come to that conclusion because more or less I felt like I owed it to my 16-year-old self to finish the job. I owed it to myself to stay on the road that I was going because I'd been on that path for so long. It's like you're playing a video game and you reach 80% completion, but you realize that you don't like playing the video game anyway, so what are you sticking around for? You're sticking around because you don't want to leave things half done or you don't want to be a quitter. And that's fair, but you gotta know when to let go of the things that you don't even want. Does that make sense? Basically, I'd been in a situation for so long that I felt obligated to my past self to finish it. And luckily, I was able to take a step back and reevaluate. And I realized at this point that the path I was pursuing no longer had the value assigned to it that my younger self assigned to the goal. Being that was very important to me when I was that young. And having been that, I was able to realize that there are much more important things than what I was pursuing at the time. More or less, I just felt like I was paying too much. And this is the effect that old dreams can have on you. That was an old dream of mine that I was pursuing. And had I not taken a step back, I would have gotten to the point where I had achieved 100% of everything that I had wanted, but had wasted so much time in a space where I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. Like I wasn't actively pursuing something based on my current set of values. So had I not taken that step back, chances are I would have still been pursuing something that was contrary to who I wanted to be. And that comes with a lot of internal resistance. It's a very uncomfortable state. And these were dreams that I did have, but the dreams more or less had expired. Not for a fact of them becoming unrealistic, but because my values had changed. No sunk costs. And that is a quote from The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, which is a pretty nice book. So if you have a chance, and if you're a reader, you can have a look at it. I'm just gonna read this last section to support the argument that I was making earlier. It says, I have no sunk costs. Sunk costs, anchoring decisions to past efforts that can't be refunded, are a devil in a world where people change over time. They make our future selves prisoners to our past, different selves. It's the equivalent of a stranger making major life decisions for you. And sometimes it is a stranger making major life decisions for you. And that is not where you want to be, bro. Your fear is no more than you just boxing yourself in at the end of the day. All things considered, living your life in a box is a bit easier because then you don't have to wrestle constantly with your infinite potential. Because one of the things that's going to happen once you do embrace the change to reinvent yourself is that you'll kind of be floating in the void for a while. Because once you drop all your previous labels, one, there's going to be a lot of resistance towards that from the people around you who no longer know how to interact with you, because in society you kind of need labels to interact with other people, because if you are having trouble wrestling with your infinite potential, imagine other people. Or once you figure out that you can be anything you want to, and you also realize that you cannot be everything, then you have to pick something, which is the journey in and of itself. And while you're picking something, you have to fight off all the resistance telling you to go back to your old self, which is not what we want to do. But the great thing about it though is that once you do decide what you want to be, you're the one who gets to decide how big your box should be. You're the one who gets to decide which box you want to be in. And you get to decide when you've had enough of any particular box. You know, I'll say it again, it's your life. And the fact of the matter is that you have to let go of who you are to grab on to who you want to be. The thing about it, the decisions that you made or didn't make in the past are the things that have defined how your life has gone up to this point. If you keep doing the same things, then you'll remain the same person. That's how that works. If you can adopt a new set of decisions with consistency over time, that consistency part is key. If you can do that, you become a different person, not overnight, because the consistency part takes time. But day by day, you will get closer to the life that you want. And if you remain consistent, there is nothing that can stop you from having it. The standards that drive your decision making have to change in accordance with who you want to be. The beliefs that you have, the lies that are holding you back, all of that has to change. And you have to go through your mind. You have to be very observant in your own mind about the things that you believe and why you believe them and whether or not they are going to help you get where you're trying to be. Because like it or not, there's a part of yourself that you have to sacrifice to become the best version of yourself. Because as much as we may not want to admit it, there are some parts of you that don't deserve to be there. Our ability to self-sabotage when you're on this journey is 100% related to what we think will be left after we eliminate those parts. It's a very scary thing to look who you are at your core, under all the escapism, under all the running away. It's not a very pleasant thing to look at, but when you can trim all the fat and come face to face with the truth of who you are, then and only then you can start to look at that objectively. Remove what doesn't need to be there. Remove what doesn't align with your goals. And once you've removed everything, you can add things that will help you to progress towards what you're aiming to faster and faster. And the more things you add, the better your life will get. Like, you will watch your life change in real time for the better. Because sometimes when we have these goals, we think that, you know, once we get there, that's what being happy is about. Being happy is about achieving the specific goal or the specific thing, like, oh, once I get rich, then I'll be happy then. But it's not really like that, because there are a certain number of changes that you'll have to make within yourself to become that. And those changes and how they affect your day-to-day life are actually what contributes to happiness and fulfillment. So I can tell you 100% from the bottom of my soul that your willingness to change is a direct result of how much you identify with the things that need to go. At the end of the day, you can't allow anything to get in the way of who you want to be, the person you know you could be. When it's all said and done, you're gonna have to answer for that. You can be whatever you want. You can have whatever you want, but you have to choose. And once you choose, don't be afraid to take the jump.